Hi everyone, how are you doing? Enjoying your first day at SOSCon? Cool. Well, thanks everyone for sticking around for the last session of the day. I'm sure we're all anxiously awaiting the party at Lucky Strike tonight. But this session is all about maintaining quality in open source, and it's a little bit of a personal journey of what I've learned from testing open source projects. Primarily, I'm going to talk about examples from my time at GitHub. So throughout this session, I will share what have been some effective ways to build in quality on open source projects. And I hope that some of these lessons might resonate with you, whether or not you work on open source projects. And just, you might be able to tell from the title, from kind of the talk description, this is neither about sauce labs nor automation, so I think it's a little bit of a change of pace from some of the other sessions that you might have seen today. But yeah, with that being said, let's get started. First, a little bit more about me. I've been at GitHub for the past 7 months now. Every day is a new challenge and filled with learning opportunities, so it's been a lot of fun so far. I've been in quality for the past 6 years now. And over the past few years in particular, I have started working a lot on open source projects and become sort of an open source aficionado. Those are some ways to contact me. Feel free to contact me throughout the conference and afterwards. I'm not super active on like Twitter or LinkedIn, but I'm very responsive, and I would love to hear from all of you. At GitHub, I primarily work under this group called Client Apps. And Client Apps is composed of 4 different products, soon to be 5. But those products include Electron, which is a platform to a framework to build cross-platform applications. There is Atom, which is a really powerful text editor, and Atom recently released Atom Teletype, which allows for real-time collaboration and pairing, which is great for distributed teams in particular. There's also GitHub Desktop, which is a tool that allows you to use GitHub natively on your desktop, and this works in both Mac and Windows. And then there's also Editor Tools, which is Editor Tools, which allows you to use the GitHub extension on various IDEs, and Visual Studio happens to be the most popular example of that. So throughout this session, I'm going to refer to examples on these different projects and kind of talk about what are some of the things that we do to ensure quality on these projects. But before I start talking about that, I kind of just want to get like a temperature check of the room. Who, by show of hands, regularly uses GitHub? Cool, everyone. Who regularly uses open source projects? Okay, nice. Also a good amount. And who contributes or maintains open source projects? Nice, okay. So one of the questions that I have that I want to kind of get started with is, what distinguishes open source projects? I think I found when I first started working on open source projects, there was something that kind of set them apart for me, you know, compared to non-open source projects, something that I think kind of, you know, just makes me think about open source a little bit differently. So the answer is community. I think community really makes all the difference. Working on open source projects, community can really, you know, have a huge impact on the project. And I think what I've noticed is that, you know, me as an individual, as a quality engineer, it usually means that I have more to take into consideration. That, you know, there's probably going to be a lot more unexpected activity at times, you know, more pull requests, more issues, more questions. So community really makes all the difference. Now I want to talk about why involvement matters. So community is important, yes, but why does their involvement actually matter? So contributions are key. I think engagement is good. Usually the more the better, I want to say, on most projects. It's really awesome to see contributors getting involved and actually being eager to work on you know, a particular project. That's usually a really positive sign and shows kind of positivity on projects. Having more eyes on the application is always a plus, especially for me as a tester. Of course, I want to be able to catch all the issues and kind of, be aware of everything going on within the application. But having more eyes on the application is always a good thing that I've found, especially, users are really kind of eager with open source when they find issues to come and pop over to the repository and open up an issue and make your team really well aware of the issue and they want things to be fixed, and usually they want them to be fixed immediately. But it's still it's really good to kind of get that extra input. In addition to just bugs, I think contributors and community members also have really great input about features and enhancements. Usually, community members are really aware of how this application is kind of affecting their workflow, and I think they're very eager to kind of speak up about things that might be affecting their workflow or slowing them down in certain ways. So I think what happens about features and enhancements, there usually are suggestions about maybe what can help make their day-to-day better when using your application. So that's also a plus, and I think with features and enhancements, the more and more you might hear users talk about something that's maybe slowing them down or something that they really want to see, that can help influence the team about what to work on next. So this is an example from a recent GitHub desktop release, and I just kind of wanted to highlight that pretty much every single one of these lines in the release notes is thanking someone for actually contributing to the project. And I think this is really cool to see that contributors are so excited to kind of help out and implement new features and fixes and enhancements. So I think it's just really cool to see, especially on these projects like GitHub Desktop and all the GitHub products that I mentioned, where we have a team of full-time maintainers who actually get paid for this, and it's their job to maintain these products. I think it's really cool to see people kind of jump in and help out. And I do want to take a moment to acknowledge all of the other open source projects, all the tons of open source projects, that don't have these kind of full-time maintainers working on the projects. It's solely composed of volunteers. So I think it's just really cool to see, and I think those projects deserve a ton of props for all the people that are willing to put their blood and sweat and tears into making these open source software projects available to everyone to enjoy and use across the world. And like I mentioned earlier, I think contributions can really make or break a project. Contributions from community members, from contributors, from maintainers can really help push a project forward. Next, I want to talk about what are different ways to encourage the community. I think that it's really important to be able to really clearly work with the community and identify ways in which you can help contribute to the project and the ways that you might go about doing so. So I feel like it's really important to make this whole process easy. And a few examples that I have of this are having a helpful Readme, having contribution guidelines, as well as maintaining build and test scripts, and having templates. So I'll show examples of all of these. We've all seen a Readme. This isn't super exciting, but this is an example from the Atom repository. And if you notice, this Readme has a bunch of really cool information, starting with statuses of different builds and integrations. It has descriptions about the projects, links where you can go to learn more, links for support, links for Twitter. It has a section for documentation, as well as installing Atom and how to get set up with using it. In addition to a Readme, I think a contributing document is really nice because it actually describes how you can actually work with this project. And it usually kind of describes, it starts with a code of conduct. I think that's really nice to have because that kind of sets the tone for how you should actually interact with the project and what the guidelines are to enforce a kind of welcoming environment. Also really important to talk about what types of contributions are important. So is the project looking for documentation, looking for help with bug fixes, with new features? It's really important to kind of outline that, as well as how to go about making these changes, like how to create issues, submit pull requests, and kind of expectations around getting those things kind of merged into the project. I think scripts can also be really good to have. Scripts to kind of do common activities such as building, cleaning, testing. I think all of that is really nice, especially if those scripts do things like set environment variables or maybe install any kind of dependencies. This can make it really easy so that people kind of follow the same steps to do things over and over, and there's going to be less surprises and a lot more uniformity. It's also a plus if you can use these same scripts and use them in your CI, so that you can make it so that every commit or every pull request is actually requiring that these scripts are run. I think this takes it a bit further, because instead of having these scripts just locally and hoping and encouraging people to run them, by actually kind of enforcing this behavior when every new commit is pushed, it enforces it so that these are the tests that need to pass, and this is what needs to happen before any new code can be merged into master. Templates are also really good because they kind of ask directed questions and provide guidelines for exactly what you were expecting to see in the description of this thing. So I really like this issue template. This is another example from the Atom repository, because it starts with the whole section on prerequisites. Like, these are all the things that you should do before actually opening the issue. You actually kind of need to confirm and reproduce this issue consistently. You should make sure that it's already not an existing issue. And then kind of the rest of the template follows kind of a standard issue description, where you want to know what are the steps to reproduce this, what is the expected behavior versus actual behavior. And pull request templates can also be really nice kind of for the same reason. And similarly to the issue template, I like the kind of requirements or prerequisites here, like kind of saying that filling out this template is required, which, like, at the end of the day, people are going to be people and do whatever they want sometimes. So it's not always going to happen that everyone fills this information out. But what's really nice about this is that it clearly states in here, like, if you don't fill all this information out, we might not review this, or we might close it. So I think that's an option for maintainers, as well as maybe nagging people to fill out all the information, so that you kind of have the full picture when actually reviewing pull requests or reviewing issues and seeing if they're valid. And another thing I wanted to point out is a community profile, which is really nice. All open source projects have a community profile, and this can be interesting to check out how a specific project is kind of meeting community standards. I think it's really interesting maybe for people who are thinking about contributing to a particular project and kind of want to see how it matches up to standards. I think this is also something to think about if you have any projects that you are considering open sourcing, and kind of making sure that you have these things already. And next, I want to talk about the different types of contributions that the community make and how to build quality processes around these areas. So the main avenues of collaboration include issues, pull requests, and support. So I'll start by talking about issues. So in terms of issues, just a few ways that you can kind of build in and quality around issues includes labeling issues, triaging regularly, and working with community members. And in terms of labeling issues, I think it can go a long way as far as providing visibility at a high level about what this issue relates to. So by default, every project comes with these 8 labels. And they're all really, color-coded. They have descriptions. I wanted to take a minute to call out these 2 type of labels in particular. There's good first issue and help wanted. And this is really awesome because it kind of signifies to contributors, especially people kind of looking to get involved in a project and maybe you're not sure what to work on. I think this signifies really clearly what are some good issues to start with. And just showing kind of an example of this in use. And an issue, it's really nice to see, to the right of the description, these are all the labels for this particular issue, and it's really nice to kind of stack them on top of each other to give enough information about what kind of this issue relates to. And then I also wanted to call out, it might be hard to see in the back, but there's also other information you can get from an issue, such as projects that this issue is actually a part of. So I'll talk about that a little bit more. So this is a project board particularly for bugs in a project, and I like to kind of maintain this project board and make sure that all bugs are in here for a couple different reasons. I think it does a good job of providing visibility, both to myself to kind of get a good idea of what issues are currently open, kind of where they fall. Are they high priority, medium priority, low priority? I can see what's in progress and what's done. And then I think this also helps external contributors as well by being able to kind of look at a particular issue, and maybe a lot of people are experiencing these issues and kind of want to know what the status is of a particular bug. And it's really nice because within an issue or within a project board, you can come and kind of see the status of something. I think one other thing that I try to do is always kind of move bugs, especially the high priority bugs. It's to kind of like making sure that those are moving along quickly and not sitting around for a long time. I don't want those issues to get stale. And it's also really important to work with collaborators. So something that happens pretty often, especially when we use labels like good first issue and help wanted, people actually see this and they want to get involved, but they have a lot of questions about how to get started. So this is an example of someone asking if we can help them tackle this as a first timer and kind of what to do to get started. So I think when this happens, you can do a few different things. You can kind of point them to the contributing doc, or point them to maybe some areas in the code where they can look to kind of approach the issue and fix this bug. Or we can even go as far as kind of like setting up a pairing session with them and walking them through different ways to actually fix the bug. In terms of pull request, a few things that I like to focus on around building in quality or having a test process and plan, testing changes, and giving feedback on pull request. This is an example of a process that I follow for every pull request. I'm sure all of you out there have processes that you follow when it comes to testing, but this is kind of just an example of one that I follow when it relates to testing and verifying PRs. It's super important that QA is added as a reviewer to start with, that QA reviews functionality and test coverage, and this basically includes test coverage for any type of pull request except for if it's something like documentation, of course. Then adding tests when necessary at a unit integration or UI level. And once the review is complete, it's really important to actually comment on the issue with testing that was done and anything interesting that was found along the way, and to either approve that PR or add some kind of verified label so that it's clear that this was tested. And then in addition to automated testing scenarios, I like to maintain manual test scenarios, kind of just like checklist of different functional areas at a high level of kind of things to ensure are still working as expected. I don't think we always go through these, but it's kind of nice just to have them around and have them accessible so that anyone can use them, not just me. I think this works well on projects that maybe don't have quality and maybe kind of want to be able to refer back to this checklist to make sure that all this functionality is still working. But at a high level, they exist for things like creating pull requests, creating repositories, cloning repositories, so kind of situations like that. And just going back to verifying pull requests, this is typically what I do after a pull request is tested. Sometimes it's a little bit much, but I just like to make sure that I'm commenting about what was done, usually specifically approving the pull request and adding a verified label. I think this just goes, again, a long way to provide visibility, especially when the contributors and maintainers that I work with are all across the world and not sitting right beside me. So this just kind of shows that this was tested. And lastly, I want to talk about support. For support, this includes things like making notices and any frequently asked question responses publicly available, having some kind of pre-canned responses to be able to kind of easily send responses to questions back to users, and having some kind of SLA for response time. So this is an example from the GitHub extension for Visual Studio website. And on this kind of help section, there's a few things that are interesting. We have notices, which kind of include, maybe common problems that people might run into and things to be aware of, as well as frequently asked questions. And then at the top, we also have a section and a link so that, if anyone is experiencing any more problems, they can actually contact us and contact a real human. And this will link you to our support email. And we like to just make sure this information is made available. So it's here on the website, but it's also like, there's a section for this in our Readme, or, basically wherever we can find somewhere to share this information with users, we like to do so. It might also work to kind of like share this information on Twitter or something. And then I wanted to talk for a minute about help. Help is kind of the internal support system that we use at GitHub. So that link to contact us that I showed in the last slide, what happens if they choose to contact us? They can craft an email, and then that will be sent to this inbox, which is kind of like a shared inbox for my team. A lot of these teams don't have anyone who is like dedicated to support, so we as the maintainers have to come in and kind of keep an eye on different support questions that are being sent here, and kind of making sure that we are responding back to these community members in a reasonable amount of time. Over on the right-hand side there, it shows how long ago someone actually communicated with this person. So we try to keep that within a day or two. The message at the top there was like 4 days ago. So that would be something that we'd want to address really quickly. And then something else that helps kind of just save time as someone is going through and triaging different support questions that are coming in. It's really nice to have canned replies, which are just kind of like really quick responses to questions that we can copy and paste. So like the first one is about a log file, for example. Like usually people will have some type of problem and just be like, hey, I'm getting this error, help. And we don't have a lot of information. So it's really nice just to say like, hey, I'm sorry that you're having this problem. Can you please go and send us the log file? You can find it at this directory. Thanks. And that is just kind of a really nice way to be able to copy and paste that information really quickly. And that's about it. I just wanted to close with some takeaways about maintaining quality in open source. I think number one, it's really important to make information publicly accessible. This is just about giving people the information they need up front in terms of how to contribute to a project. Number two, have processes to support contributors in place and make sure to follow these processes in order to maintain and ensure quality. And third, it's important to be responsive and helpful. I think in order to build a strong community of people who enjoy working and using your product, we have to make sure to kind of work with the community and kind of build that rapport there. And with that, I just want to say thank you all for being here. We have some time for questions. And again, you can contact me on any of those outlets. Thanks.
So my question is, one of the things that I've seen with open source projects is when somebody wants to contribute to an open source project, there's just too much out there, too much documentation, too much friction to get started. Do you have any recommendations on how we can make it easy for people to start contributing to an open source project?
So you find that there's too much documentation?
Too much documentation, too many steps to follow, right? It's not diluted to an extent that people can quickly get started with the project and be really productive contributing to the project.
Sure.
In terms of pull requests.
Yeah, then I guess what I do when I'm looking for new projects, I really rely on labels, honestly. I go and like look for issues that might be relevant for me to work on and issues that I might know how to tackle, and just, yeah, kind of maybe write someone like, or just, comment on the issue, hey, I'm interested in working on this and kind of want to know more about how I can get involved. I think that's probably a good way to get a direct answer about how to get involved on a very specific part of the project.
Yeah, thanks very much, Meaghan. It was a phenomenal presentation, very useful. It's kind of twofold. I kind of had two areas I wanted to get your insight on. So I apologize for that. But
no worries.
One is, and I imagine, in terms of major pitfalls that you see, I imagine you can just reverse engineer some of these and see actually those would be the pitfalls. But is there any one major pitfall that you see in relation to open source? And then another is in relation to, let's say, with the volume of patching and version updating and things like that have to be done with certain libraries and so on, and in general with everyday sort of new disclosures on vulnerabilities and that kind of thing. Communication is probably a great way to manage that, but have you seen any effective strategies for managing kind of that patching and version updating and so on?
Okay, so the first
I apologize for the double question.
No worries. So the first question was about pitfalls
with
open source?
Yeah, just say some common pitfalls that you see or some major sort of cautionary areas to watch out for.
That's a good question. Let's see. I think for me personally, I think we do get a fair amount of people like looking to get involved in the project and having lots of questions. So it personally bugs me like when we don't respond to someone for a very long time.
Absolutely.
Because I don't think, it's like people are really eager to help out. I don't think that is really like a great thing to do to kind of encourage and facilitate that community.
Right.
Other pitfalls. I think going along with that, it's just important to kind of understand how to communicate with different contributors, especially like we get a lot of contribution during times like Hacktoberfest, where we're really like, pushing for people to get involved. Like I noticed there's a surge of like random pull requests coming.
Right.
A lot of times they don't have a lot of detail, like they're not, full of great content. So it's like we have to do a lot of back and forth sometimes to like kind of work with these people, who are really eager to get involved, but like don't always make it the easiest. So I feel like that is something, I don't know, that we can do better. Like again, we have the templates and we have the contributing docs. Maybe it's too much docs, but that's something that happens.
For sure. Thanks very much.
And the second part of the question
and then the second question was, kind of that, if it is, I don't know if it's so much an enforcement mechanism or to the extent you want to make it one, but as disclosures come out about various vulnerabilities in certain, libraries that may need to be updated or that kind of thing. I know that GitHub has the alerts for security alerts for vulnerabilities is tremendously useful. Are there other strategies or other ways that, that's kind of communicated or managed?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I mean, we try to communicate anything through different notices and whatnot, but still that doesn't reach everyone exactly. So even last week, we kind of had a big change where we turned off support for TLS1, and a lot of people were on TLS1, and like we had notices about this beforehand, but still like the day that it was turned off, we got a bunch of questions like, oh my gosh, why can't I log in anymore? What's going on? So like things like that happen, and basically like what we did in that situation was literally copy and paste like the same response to a bunch of people.
That's really
I don't know. I feel like that's not the best use of our time, but sometimes like that happens, and that's why it's nice to have like canned responses to just shoot off to people over and over again who are asking the same thing, and we just like need to communicate with them quickly.
Definitely, yeah. So when those disclosures come out, you prepare those responses.
Pretty much, yeah.
That's awesome. Awesome. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
So, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. So, and have you seen when you start off with this new project, let's say, and the reason I ask this question is because I run, we spoke earlier, right? I run the internal open source within JP Morgan Chase Bank, right? So when we start off with this new project, is there a recommendation or is there a good practice that you could follow to spread that word so that we get more contributors? Because you've been in the business for a very long time doing this. So what have you learned along the way to make that happen?
So initially what pops back into my head is I want to point back to the labels, but like those help wanted and up for good first time, those labels, I think that's really nice because they can kind of link into services. I don't know if anyone's familiar with Up for Grabs, for example, but for anyone looking to contribute to new projects, this is a service where you can kind of go and see a list of projects that actually are looking for contributors. And like you can see that based on the label. So you'll see that like the Atom project has 30 issues that they want help with, or a good first issue. So I think there are different services like that where you can go if you're actually searching for projects to get involved in and kind of like filter down based on like, what you're interested in and what's looking for help.
Any other questions? Oh, great. Thank you, Meaghan.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, everybody.